Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in.
It is Kate, Kelly, and PozzA, and we have just seen some thrilling racing in Thailand. We're going to jump right into it because there's so much to cover. And to start, we're going to start with Moto 3. There's lots to talk about when it comes to the race itself, but I do want to talk about something that happened sort of in qualifying and a little bit of a different side we saw to David Alonso. This is interesting in the fact that David Alonso showed a bit more of his aggressive side. The key moment for me was when he threw it up the inside of Angel Baqueras in qualifying when he wasn't on a hot lap. So this was basically to ruin Piqueras' lap, and it's the first time we've seen this more spicy side of David Alonso, the side that's a bit more aggressive and I suppose channeling the more aggressive riders. So my question to you both is, do you like this more aggressive side of David Alonso?
Personally, I've sort of always liked when riders show a bit more of their aggressive sides, as long as it's not like Jeremy Alcoba style almost, I feel like is the way to explain it, which won't come to anyone as a surprise as soon as they learn a few of the riders that I support. But yeah, I think it's good to see, especially now that he's won the World Championship, he can sort of afford to go a bit harder with nothing really at stake. And yeah, I hope he keeps showing it sort of into the future as well.
I feel like an aggressive side is something that every rider does have, just some of them don't show it as much, like David Alonso. I wouldn't say fan. I'm never really a fan of drivers or riders that are like overly aggressive. But he wasn't. Like he kept it very. It was like clean aggressive, if that makes sense. Like it was hard racing, but it wasn't like if you don't move out of the way, I'm gonna punch you out. So it made for entertaining racing, and it shows us a side of David Alonso that we didn't really see for the World Championship, but could have actually been detrimental to it. So yeah, really exciting to watch.
Awesome to see that we're all pretty much in agreement. The race was pretty sensational, and we've got a shout out to Australian Joel Kelso because this was his first pole position, which was wonderful. Unfortunately, it didn't translate into a podium because the podium was via Lanetta, who is having a wonderful rookie season, and David Alonso. The only thing I wanted to touch on is the incident between Via and Furasato as we crossed the line, I suppose. This saw Furasato coming off the bike after minor contact with Colin Via. Basically, what happened was Furasato crossed the line separately to his bike. It was quite sensational to see, and thankfully Furasato's okay. He's been declared fit. But what are your guys' thoughts on the race?
I liked it, I'd say. Obviously a certain incident prevailed me from liking it as much as I should have liked it. But the racing was very, very good. Considering it was a considerably shortened race, they made use of what they had, and I did have a lot of fun watching it. A very dodgy weekend with the weather. It had me stressed out about what was gonna happen. But yeah, it kind of sucked, especially for Eddie O'Shea, who did take a risk and tried to use the full wet tires, and it just did not work out. The poor guy was dropping like a stone. He was getting lapped. It was awful. I do feel bad for him. He did try something, and I have to commend him for that. Big incident between Angel Baqueras and Adrian Fernandez, who they just came together. You can't be doing that as teammates. I understand why some people would, but if you're gonna fight your teammate, you have to be careful while doing it, if you get me. And they were just not careful. Pretty big incident between Tayo Furasato and Colin Vire over the line as well, where I'm still can't really figure out what happened. People are calling for Vire to get a race ban and a massive penalty, and I don't see how or why. It was a it was a severe racing incident, but it was a racing incident, you know. It wasn't really a case of Vire being able to just turn transparent and glide through Versailles. Do you get me? He was faster. He was going to get the overtake, and it was just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He tried an overtake and he did it successfully, but unfortunately took Tayo out while doing it. Thank God Tayo was okay. He managed to cross the line with his bike in fifth, so he still got fifth. I was really excited for a Tayo podium, but in a general aspect, I don't see how Colin will get anything worse than a long lap penalty. Even then, I don't see why he should get it, but FIM stewards are like that. So, apart from that, very, very good race. I'll let Poz talk about the Lunetta podium because he likes his rookies.
I was going to start off with the Via and Frossato incident as well. I don't personally think it should be a penalty. I do think it was just a pure racing incident. I just think that the biggest issue is that riders have been penalised for almost that exact incident before. I'm not going to give a proper example because it might just make me sound a bit biased, but yeah, I don't think it was a penalty, but it's been penalised before, which I think is the sort of issue, as always, with the stewards and inconsistency. But yeah, going on to the rookies, obviously Luca Lunetta got onto the podium for the second time this year with his best result of the year. Had a really strong race, came back from going just about to Malaysia in the first corner. The next best rookie was all the way down in 15th, and it was Jacob Ralston back in the points. He was quite slow to start the race, but managed to come back in the end. Tachkon Bouazri was 17th in his home race. Javi Zuratuza was in 18th. David Amenza got 20th. Noah Detweiler finished 23rd. And Eddie O'Shea, Angel Piqueras, and Joel Esteban all failed to finish the race.
That incident between the Leopard boys is very interesting, and I imagine that Piqueras got a very stern talking to. Moto 2 was just as dramatic, possibly with the FP1 incident between. Actually, it might be FP1 or P1, honestly. My brain's starting to blur together in these flyaways. The incident between Tony Arbolino and Zonta van de Gorberg. I'll try and summarize it real quick. This is Tony Arbolino was trying to restart his bike in pit lane after he had already crashed out. He was coming down pit lane entry. There was a marshal. Zonta crashed into the back of him and crashed into his leg. The result was Zonta got a pit lane penalty and Arbolino got a 3-place grid drop. I do want to talk about another incident with Tony Arbolino later in the question, but I know, Kelly, you have lots of thoughts on this incident, so I'm going to hand the mic to you.
Okay, just to start this off before I go on my little tangent, I have the utmost respect for most MotoGP journalists, just in case anyone's wondering. Between this incident, I do not understand how Zonta got a penalty. I don't. It was literally a case where Tony should not have been in the pit lane entry with a bike that wasn't started. Do you get me? Like, obviously, he was at a large amount to blame at this incident, but people just seem to be going after Zonta, which I think is quite silly. If your bike has shut off, you need to get out. At the start, you need to get out. Okay, like you don't sit there trying to start up your bike in a pit lane entry. I feel like it's common sense. Do you get me? Like I thought it was kind of stupid. But even moving on from that, in the way that Zonta was coming in and he saw Tony there, he was like, "Oh God, shit! Like, where do I go?" And it looked like Tony was looking to the right, so Zonta decided, "I'm going to go left." And then a marshal came out of where? Nowhere. Came out of absolutely nowhere and started running up the side of Zonta. So he was turning left, trying not to hit on Marshall. And then Tony just decided, "Oh, I don't want to go right anymore," and moved to the left, right into Zonta. I don't see how Zonta could have avoided that whatsoever. And there is a particular journalist I had an amazing discussion with. For the sake of this podcast, I'll call him Doom and Gloom. But if you want to figure out who he was yourself, that is absolutely no problem. I think you can guess anyway. Was very outspoken about how this was pretty much completely Zonta's fault, calling for a race ban. And then he was all like, "Oh, but there was so much space he could go to. and stuff like that. And I was like, well, if you use your eyes, doom and gloom, you'd see that that Tony was looking to the right and looked like he was about to take up that space. Zonta was just moving where he saw. He could not have done more than he did.
Yeah, I share, I'd say, a similar thought, not as like strongly as of an opinion as Kelly. I just think it was sort of everyone was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and sort of everyone made a bit of a mistake in the whole ordeal. But I feel like the biggest problem was probably just the marshal that ran out into the pit lane without really looking where he was going. Because I feel like if Zonta had have been able to use the space where the marshal was, there wouldn't have been a collision. And it's just the fact that this has been a problem in the past. Not long ago, I think it was a mechanic or someone ran out in the pit lane in Misano and caused a crash with Unai Radri. So it's not great to see, but it is what it is, I guess. These things just happen.
Poor Tony Arbolino. His weekend didn't get much better. So the question I was going to ask you, I'll ask now. Tony Arbolino's weekend only got worse because he had a collision between himself and Firmin Aldeguer very early on in the race, which took Arbolino out of the race. This is clearly Firmin Aldeguer's fault, and being a member of the Firmin Aldeguer fan club, I have to admit I think a single long lap penalty would suffice, but I wouldn't be opposed to a double long lap for this move. What penalty do you guys think Firmin Aldeguer should cop for this? Because really, he should cop for it. He was out of control into the corner, or at the very least, overly ambitious and absolutely ruined Tony's race. Admittedly, Aldeguer does have a fractured hand, which is going to rule him out of Sepang, and I don't want to take that into account when I give my opinion because I think it should be the move that is the cause of the penalty rather than the outcome. But what are your guys' thoughts?
I do love Furman. I love Furman a lot, but like, where were you going, mate? What was the plan? Was there even a plan? Like, it was so even to look at. It makes you think like, what was his plan here? Like, where was he actually attempting to go? I suppose if you're in the heat of the moment, you don't actually think of little things like that. But like looking at it, you're like, Jesus, mate. In terms of getting a penalty, I would imagine a long lap penalty, but I can see why if they do give him a double long lap penalty. Um, I don't know if the incident was as severe enough. I think it was more a silly move, but I don't think it was severe enough to get a double long lap penalty. So I think I might stick with a long lap penalty and see where it goes.
Yeah, I was going to go down the route and say that I feel like he probably won't end up getting a penalty because the stewards kind of have this thing where they think a rider's been penalized enough just because they injured themselves in the crash, which is certainly a way to think about it. In the end, I think either one or two long laps would probably be fair. Yeah, something like that. I think would do it right because it was just a bit of a rushed move on lap one, and Aldeguer's kind of shown over the year that he's okay with making those rushed moves, and it hasn't always turned out exceptionally well. But I'm sure he'll learn from it, especially this time he's gotten injured from it. But yeah, one or two long laps I think would be sufficient.
And now we can actually talk about the Moto2 race because it was sensational and it was also red flagged due to rain falling late in the race. The podium from memory was Marcos Ramirez in P3, Ayagura in P2, and Aaron Canet in P1. Aaron Canet's third win of the season, but without a doubt overshadowed by the fact that this meant that Ayagura has won the World Championship. MT Helmets MSI have also won the Teams World Championship, and a special shout out to some cat Chantra because he finished in P4 after quite a low qualifying position And had it gone on a little bit more, I think he would have got a podium place. But what are your guys' thoughts on the race?
I loved the race. I mean, it kind of feels weird to say considering I am a Fermanagh fan, but just in terms of general racing, it was very, very good. I'm really delighted that Aguero won the championship. I'm genuinely happy for him. In an aspect, I did want Sergio Garcia to just make a magic comeback and win, but I think it was way out of order. I don't think it was ever really going to happen. Yeah, no, really happy for I. He does deserve it. He deserves it a lot. So really nice to see him. I believe you're very happy with Aaron Canet in P1. At least your favorite rider did something cool this weekend. Um, yeah, no, the ones I like were just they were way down. I mean, Jake Dixon in seventh wasn't too bad, but then it just got worse. You had Alonso Lopez in 11th, Garcia in 12th. Then we go a little bit more down, and we have Van der Gorberg in 19th. And then we have Ferman Aldeguer in the gravel. So wasn't my best race in terms of riders I like. But just in terms of general racing, it was really entertaining and a lot of crashes. It started to stress me out a little bit, but trust me, MotoGP was worse.
Yeah, I also thought it was a good race. Fair bit of action throughout the field. I was gonna say something, I can't remember what it was, but I'll just get going with the rookies. Diogo Moreira was the top rookie in fifth, had a really good race, had his sort of trademark good qualifying, but didn't actually drop through the field like he normally does, which is a positive sign. Dennis Onchu came home in 10th. It was a good result. Still probably needs to figure out a bit more of the qualifying because in the sort of mid part of the race, he was stuck behind Alonso Lopez. Yuno Sasaki was in the points in 13th, and Mario Aggi just missed out in 16th with Masia in 17th. And Senna Agis crashed out quite early on, and that was all of the rookies.
So let's talk about MotoGP. I'm going to run through the podium of both days real quick before I ask my question. The sprint saw Pecco Bagnaia in P3, Jorge Martin in P2, and Enea Bastianini in P1. The race saw Pedro Acosta in P3, Jorge Martin in P2, and Pecco Bagnaia in P1. A quick notable mention for the sprint was that the top 8 bikes were all Ducatis. Very impressive and pretty sensational, really, and definitely history making. But given where we are now in the championship, with Jorge Martin being 17 points up as we come into Sepang, Pecco Bagnaia's domain in a way. He's so strong in Sepang. We could be looking at possibly the closest title that we've seen in quite a long time. So, a question to you both. Who do you think will win the MotoGP World Championship? And who is it that you want to win?
My answers are both the same. I do genuinely feel like Pecco Bagnaia will win the championship, and I do want Pecco Bagnaia to win the championship. You get me? I love Jorge. I genuinely do, but honestly, I'm more of a Pecco fan. I always was more of a Pecco fan. Yeah, no, I really feel like he's gonna pull through and get it. I honestly do because he's been taking little chunks out of Martin recently, so I have faith that he's going to be able to. I say like barely pull it off now, but like I feel like he will pull it off. But my opinion's different to both of yours.
Your opinion is different to both of ours because I'm going the other way, and I do think Jorge Martin can get it done. Just with the fact that he doesn't really need to beat Bagnaia anymore. He just kind of needs to finish just behind him to win the championship. And he's been looking so strong recently, hasn't been making massive errors. And yeah, if he can keep that up, I think he can get up there. And I think it'd just be nice to see a different champion for a change. And also with the fact that he's leaving Ducati at the end of the year, I think it'll be just kind of nice to see him take a title to another manufacturer.
Yeah, I agree entirely with PozzA. it would just be super, super satisfying to see Jorge Martin win the championship, given everything that happened this year with Ducati and getting passed over. It's actually nothing against Pecco. It's just purely the fact that I want Jorge Martin to be like, F you, basically, to Ducati and take that #1 plate over to Aprilia. Moving on to the race, something that will soothe Kelly's heart is the fact that Luca Marini finished in P12. This is obviously something I really love because as a Honda fangirl, all of the Hondas finished in the points this weekend, and that makes me extremely, extremely happy. So that was probably my moment of the weekend, and that's one of the only things I can focus on in the race. But what did you guys think of the race?
As much as it does make me happy that Luca Marini finished in the points, it was kind of caused like 7 riders crashed. Uh, not to say I'm not happy about that. I will take the 4 points. I'm delighted over that. But yeah, it was probably because of the 7 riders that crashed out on their own different times, and it was kind of overshadowed by the fact that Marco Bezzecchi went down. It looks like the crash was his fault. However, his bike did seem to have a technical issue because I don't believe you can drop that many positions by having a mid start. You can't. I don't see it. Um, in my opinion, I feel as though he looked like he had a technical issue and then splat. That was pretty much it. He was just so slow compared to the rest of the field, and I just don't really see how he could have done that himself. But yeah, he went down. That was quite depressing. One thing I will mention is Franco Morbidelli, where he was up near Fabio Quartararo when Quartararo was having a very good race. Like he was up near the podium spots, he was fighting, he was actually having a good race. And then Franco Morbidelli, the little word, comes in and goes crash bang wallop right into Fabio Quartararo. And Quartararo goes down, and Franco just carries on as if nothing's happened. And like, what? There's so many words I could use to describe that man, both at that moment and right now, but I can't because reasons. Anyway, Fabio did get up and continued the race, but his pace was just gone. He was way behind the field, and his race was ruined by Morbidelli. And then, just to add a little bit of salt in the wound for Morbidelli, he went down on his own accord. L, Frankie, L. That is karma coming right at you. I'm glad you're okay. I never wish for injury, but that is karma coming for you, and I am delighted that happened to you. Anyway, moving on from the other drama bits. Alex Rins did end up going down. He was having a pretty mediocre race, but he was doing okay. So I'm happy that I'm really happy that no, not happy. I'm sad. I'm tired. I'm sad that he went down, but I'm happy he had a good weekend before that, if that makes sense. That's what I'm trying to convey there. Um, Jack Miller did actually manage to have a good race. I was actually so happy about that. Like he was very close to getting a podium, and I think it's the first time that I actually did wish that Jack Miller got a podium because he did genuinely deserve this one, and I'm so sad it didn't happen. But I'm just happy he had a good race. To be honest, he really deserves that little boost. And yeah, Pega Bagnaia won. Pedro Acosta got a podium after crashing out in the sprint. Finally, Pedro. My God, like the amount of trauma you've caused me is not right. So yeah, apart from Marc Marquez crashing himself out again as well, it was a pretty good race.
Yeah, it was a race of mistakes for pretty much the entire field. Enea Bastianini and Marc Marquez also went down, as you mentioned. Marc Marquez almost saved it. It was interesting as well because after Marc did end up going down, Jorge Martin was probably about just very close to crashing straight behind him, which realistically probably handed Pecco the win, just with Jorge not wanting to push too hard and throw away the points. But yeah, fun, exciting race. Good to see a wet race every once and again. Normally brings a bit of drama, and yeah, did that today. Did that on Sunday.
That's it from us. as always, thank you so much for joining us. Honestly, we appreciate each and every single one of you that listens. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. We'll be back next week reviewing Sepang and giving our insights into all of the racing. But for now, have a wonderful week. See you next week.